Over the weekend, the movie buzz was centered around the 50th anniversary of Jaws, and for good reason. But less noticeable was the 30th anniversary of Disney's Pocahontas. There were no notices, no special editions, no parades, no fanfare. Right now, Disney's busy celebrating the success of Andor, which to my mind is a much more engaging portrait of oppressed people. For 3 decades, Pocahontas has been more or less a laughingstock in Disney's renaissance. A well-intentioned attempt to raise the animated form, explore untapped territory, honor the plight of Native American people, and hopefully create a prestige item that would secure them a Best Picture Oscar that was denied them with Beauty and the Beast. But whatever hopes the studio had for this movie crumbled under audience indifference, protests from Native Americans, and a legacy so spotty that Disney all but remade it 21 years later in a different setting as Moana. Yet, the shaky legacy remains. Anytime I bring this movie up to anyone, it's usually met with groans, eye rolls, scoffing, or a collar tug. I get it. I get all of it. I get those reactions. And at the same time, I get why we have the movie that we have. I understand why Pocahontas exists. I get the thinking that went into it, even away from the prospect of making a Mint and Burger King toys. I also get where it went wrong. The story of Pocahontas is a tricky story to tell. It's important to keep it real. Stick as closely to the facts as you can within the framework of a Disney movie. But you must realize that for this to be a Disney movie, it must first be a Disney movie, and that notion makes for a very difficult stew of opposing ideals. We're dealing with the colonization of this American continent by European settlers that would lead to the mass enslavement and genocide of its native inhabitants that has created issues that are still with us. That's really hard to slap on the side of a Burger King cup. But outside of the strange and difficult duality of trying to turn the story of Pocahontas into a Disney movie, I get where they were coming from. By the time Pocahontas came out in June of 1995, Disney had given itself a license to pretty much produce whatever they wanted, within the brackets of their brand, of course. In the previous 5 years, they had created a breathtakingly ambitious body of work that would cause a mass reevaluation of the animated form. With The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and then The Lion King, they were on top of the world, not only creating great films, but pulling the art form out of the doldrums of kiddie entertainment. And again, that Oscar. I have suspicions that the story of Pocahontas may have been chosen because of the resurgence of films trying to honor the struggles of Native Americans, after so many decades of Hollywood turning them into bloodthirsty savages played mostly by white actors, which makes you think that possibly Marlon Brando was onto something. The apology tour would culminate with 7 Oscars for Dances with Wolves in 1991, including Best Picture, plus an affirmation that the Western was doing well after Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven also nabbed the top award 2 years later. By the time Pocahontas landed in theaters, that Western revision had kind of dried up. Audiences clued into this, as the movie opened with a tepid response and box office that left the movie duking it out with Batman Forever, and the critical response was leaned heavily on praising the grand look of the film, while also noting the basic underwhelming nature of the story, and deciding whether or not it was a good idea to turn teenage Pocahontas into a buxom supermodel. Personally, I think it was just a difficult story to sell to kids. For one thing, unlike The Little Mermaid, The Rescuers Down Under, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King, this is not a fantasy. I mean, outside of Ghost Tree Granny, which oddly enough turned out to be the one thing that drew most of the praise from just about everyone. But mostly, the movie reaches for a bend of realism and revisionism of history that makes for mixed emotions. At a time when the general public has embraced the Howard Zinn version of history, I think this kind of revision feels a little unwise. This Disney version adheres to a romantic mythology that we all learned as children, much of it bogusly recounted by John Smith himself, that he was seized by the tribe and was about to have his brains bashed in before Pocahontas threw herself on his head and demanded that the madness be stopped, asserting,
"If you kill him, you'll have to kill me too."
And after being ordered by her father to stand back, reasons,
"I love him, Father."
It also asserts that his death sentence was brought on by the accidental death of Coquitlam, whom Powhatan had chosen as a husband for Pocahontas, but to whom she had doubts because...
But he's so... serious.
In reality, Pocahontas married Coquitlam, whom she reportedly loved very much, and they had a union that produced a daughter in 1612. From there, Pocahontas' fate got pretty dark. In an organized plot, she was lured onto an English ship, and after she was safely aboard, Captain Samuel Argall had Coquitlam killed. During her captivity, she learned English, converted to Christianity, and married John Rolfe, with whom she later produced a son named Thomas. In England, she was paraded and exhibited as an example of the civilized savage. Pocahontas' journey would be cut tragically short as she died in March 1617 at the age of 21. Comparatively, the Disney version retrofits the story to streamline it into a much less complicated narrative. After she rescues John Smith, her father recants his violent ways and proclaims that if there is to be a war between the English and the natives, that it won't come from him. The Indians and the colonists lower their weapons, only to have the silence broken by Governor Radcliffe, the movie's chief villain, who orders his men to fire, only to be met with baleful protest. John Smith takes a bullet for Powhatan, and the colonists seize upon Radcliffe. He is then chained and set out to sea in a tiny dinghy. Pocahontas and the injured Smith are reunited, requite their love, and are separated as the English head back across the ocean because her place is with her people. Peace is had between the Indians and the English, and Pocahontas watches her beloved sail out to the horizon as she strikes a pose. Even a rudimentary study of the commonly known American history, as has been presented here, reveals the problem with Disney's Pocahontas. It's obvious that the filmmakers were trying to break new ground by presenting a strong woman of color who imparts to the savage colonists a message about both the environment and diversity. What is perplexing, though, is that the movie is not bad. If you can watch it without dragging the history into it, it's a pretty epic film with noble intentions. There's a good message about unity and brotherhood. There's a good message about respecting the environment and people who are different than you. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that. And there's certainly a grand effort put into the production. The style here is absolutely gorgeous. I really miss the age of 2D animation. The Oscar-winning score by Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz is phenomenal, and there's no slouch in the way the film is presented visually. I mean, look at these backgrounds. And I could also mention that it is encouraging to have a woman of color presented in a Disney movie who isn't wishing for a man, but tries to convince the men in her life that she, in fact, does have a singular compass to chart her own path. That's encouraging, and it's progressive. The problem is that this is a Disney movie that is so serious that it seems to lose sight of what we go to see a Disney movie for. The magical elements are missing, the fun is missing. And I realize that in a story about the plight of the American Indian, it's possible to have too much levity. But from a studio that gave us this, and this, the message of Pocahontas comes off like we're being given a civics lesson courtesy the parameters of Walt Disney Pictures. I don't pretend to know how the screenwriters could have honored Pocahontas' story and stuck to the facts, given their limitations. But I think possibly the only way to do this is simply to leave Pocahontas alone. Go in a different direction by adapting any number of old Indian folk tales. Tell one of the stories they tell each other. That way we can have the mystical elements and the magical creatures and the Disney magic. I think that might have been a better way to go. I think right now, as we're looking at the half-century mark of Jaws and readying ourselves for anniversaries of classics of our youth to come, Pocahontas seems like a lesson learned in that Disney could do a lot of things, but it couldn't do everything. The positive legacy of Pocahontas is that Disney seemed to have learned from it. Kind of. As the culture has changed, they've tried to embrace diversity. They've tried to be progressive. You could say they've at least tried to paint with all the colors of the wind. What does that even mean, anyway? For Armchair Cinema, I'm Jerry Dean Roberts. I'll see you next time.